All right, let's start a fight, shall we? So I guess Warner Brothers is doing a Green Lanterns TV series or maybe movie. I'm not quite sure. It makes sense because, as I mentioned in the Black Cops video, there's a new thing for like having police shows that aren't actually about police. You know, fantasy police. The Lantern Corps from Green Lantern are essentially space cops, and this allows them to have all the cool propaganda, you know, action cop stuff without actually thinking about what cops really do. So, you know, so enjoy guilt-free, maybe. That's up to you. Also in agreement with the video is the fact that they announced that the lead person is going to be Green Lantern John Stewart, one of the lesser heralded but truly iconic and possibly first ever black superheroes. And he's going to be played by rising star Aaron Pierre. And this set off some discourse in the last couple of weeks that I just, again, been busy, a lot going on. I didn't get a chance to chime in. And I probably am glad I'm waited a while because I don't think the take I'm about to give would have been well received during the heat of the conversation. A lot of black comic fans are a little annoyed at the casting. Some people are calling this colorism, people whose opinions I genuinely respect, by the way, and I get why that was the initial reaction. Others, many of whom really shouldn't be all that loud in this conversation, are saying, well, he's still black. What's the big deal? Which, yeah, but I'm somewhere in between, but for reasons I haven't really seen discussed enough. So that's what this video is for. I'm going to break down why I personally am perfectly fine with this casting, but how I also feel like people who have issues with it are justified, even if they're maybe justified for the wrong reasons, and also why I am still worried about what this means for future representation for black people and black men in our media. So first, let's point something out. Having dark-skinned characters in books or comics suddenly becoming a few shades lighter in movies and TV shows is something that happens a lot with black characters. Most significant is probably Storm, who has only been played by lighter-skinned actresses compared to what the character looks like in comics. There's also Rue from The Hunger Games, who gave one of the earliest moments of anti-woke nonsense in nerd media way back when that movie first dropped, and she was played by a lighter-skinned black actress. But if you go and you look at the book, the actress probably should have been darker, and it still didn't make a difference to the audience, who said, I can't believe Rue is black at all. One of the goofiest examples of this comes from Resident Evil 5 of all places, where the character Sheva, who was supposed to be South African, I don't know where these notes are, but I know I saw this, where the developers, the Japanese developers, made some final tweaks to the character to make her more appealing. And when you look at the character a little closely, like not when it's in the middle of the game, but when you just pay attention to what the character looks like, you notice that her face is a good 3 or 4 shades lighter than the rest of her body. So basically they said, we need to make her look more like Beyonce. And like, I mean, look at the shit. The shit looks silly once you focus on it. And the silliest thing is Zoe Saldana basically doing blackface to play Nina Simone when they could have just gotten a darker skinned black woman to be the actress. Instead, they got the lightest woman they could and then slathered paint on her face, because that's how Hollywood does us. Or to be specific, and here's where things get complex, that's really mostly how Hollywood does black women. And this is gonna throw some people off, so just follow me for a second. Just chill out in the comments while I get this all in order. Colorism is a very complex topic, and before I go any further, I want to highlight some creators who have talked about it extensively, such as Khadija Mbo and Yara Zaid, as I should not be the last voice that you hear about this topic. But to give a simple definition for the sake of this video, it's basically discrimination and prejudice based on the darkness on one's skin or complexion, their phenotype, or specific features being closer to white than whatever their darker skin ethnicity is more typical of. It's similar to good old-fashioned racism, except that colorism also is a huge issue within ethnic groups. So there is a tendency for white people to discriminate more against darker skinned black people, and this has been proven through research to to manifest in education, the criminal justice system, media representation, and so on. But this same privileging for lighter skin also happens within community, as lighter skinned Black people, especially women, are privileged in a variety of ways due to having lighter skin. And this is a worldwide phenomenon, just as white supremacy is a worldwide phenomenon. I won't say for a fact that colorism is always connected to being colonized by white Europeans, but it's definitely connected, as you can see, in places that have been colonized, such as South America, the Caribbean, Southeast and East Asia. You will still see elements of colorism, elements of darker skinned people from those regions wanting to lighten their skin or just being erased from their own media because lighter skin is preferred. A relevant example of this comes from Simu Liu, the lead actor in the Shang-Chi Marvel movie, where here in America, we thought he was a great pick. But if you go and you look at the way that many Chinese and other, I guess, East Asian communities spoke about his casting online, they were saddened that they picked a darker skinned Asian man to play that role. So I say this to say that I need you all to know that I know that colorism is a thing, period. Do not start in my comments trying to say it's not. Colorism is a thing, featureism is a thing, light skin privilege is a thing, and that is across gender lines. It is still a thing. However, all right, stick with me for a second. In many ways, colorism works differently for Black men in America.
Hey, did you see where I put my microphone? Oh yeah, I think Jaden has it. I gave it to him. You gave Jaden my microphone? Yeah, he asked for it. What's wrong? Jaden's light skin. Oh.
White at night, but black in light. Who will fight for my light skin rights? Both monkey and massa. A world with two lives.
I have an old video about this that maybe I'll revisit, as it's one of my early videos where I was still recording off of a cell phone. So it's not the quality that many have come to expect from my channel. But in that video, I talk about the fact that although colorism in many ways works exactly the same for Black men as it does Black women, in some ways it doesn't. And if you don't understand that, you really just not have the best analysis for situations like this. In many situations where you engage with Black men as a unique gendered identity. And as I said many times before on several channels, we do have a severely underdeveloped apparatus for understanding Black men as a gender. One key thing to keep in mind is that colorism is often based in issues around desirability, as in what traits or features are considered to be most desirable for attracting a mate, regardless of what gender, identity, or sexuality that mate is. So I'm going to be doing some huge generalizations here that do hinge on heteronormative frameworks, so give me grace, but understand this kind of translates across gender and sexuality. In general, if something is considered more masculine, then it is considered more desirable. In general. And if something is considered more feminine, same thing. And in a white supremacist society, masculinity and femininity are going to hinge greatly on images built off of white men and white women, aka white masculinity and white femininity. Conversely, Black men and women have often been pushed as far away from these idealized images as possible. And phenotypically speaking, for Black women, certain specific elements of white femininity, such as long, straight hair, lighter eyes, smaller features, and of course, lighter skin, all make it hard for them to be considered feminine in a white supremacist society. Black women persistently struggle with being seen as feminine in the wider world, even from Black men, sometimes especially from Black men, who, for a small but loud contingent, can be the most vocal in their negativity toward Black women. Again, a loud minority, but still a thing. And the issue of being seen as feminine isn't just a challenge on the dating market for Black women, but it also creates challenges for employment, safety, and protection under the law. Black girls are often adultified, meaning they're seen as less innocent and older than they actually are, which means if Black girls go missing, people don't care. Or if Black girls are victims of certain types of crimes, people think that they probably did something to deserve it. I've also talked about how doctors and nurses, and this is again research-based, genuinely believe that Black women have higher pain tolerances than other women, which leads to a litany of other negative health outcomes. And most apparently in our media, at least here in America, a lot of Black women often find themselves erased or at best limited when it comes to being seen and visible. And it isn't quite the same for black men. I talk about this in my Black Gender Wars video, but the short version is basically the tools and capacities for how black men can access white masculinity is a different tool bag than how black women need to try to access white femininity. Watch the video for the fullness of that take. I know that's going to piss some people off. I can't with y'all right now. Go watch the other video. So a thing that's hard for some people to get is that the way that black men are able to navigate and maneuver trying to access white masculinity is just not as possible for black women trying to navigate and access white femininity. It's not saying that black men are equal to white men or that black men are the white people of black people and stuff that I know is going to trigger a handful of certain type of Negroes in my audience. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the gaps there and the way we travail those gaps don't work exactly the same. And thus, the face of the colorism discussion is often a dark-skinned black woman's face because they're leading that discussion, and for good reason, because colorism affects them the most and the worst. But the byproduct of that is that because the conversation around colorism is focused on darker skinned black women, it's hard for me to talk about these differences without people putting words in my mouth saying that I'm trying to deny that colorism is a thing or that it's actually light skinned black people of all genders that are oppressed. And like, please, again, you getting ready to write a dissertation in my comment section about light skinned people, actually watch the video. This before you finish the dissertation. Finish the video. So a lot of the ways that colorism affects black men is exactly the same as the way it affects black women. Lighter skinned black men are considered smarter, less criminal. They get better opportunities in education and in professional arenas, and they're more likely to receive lighter sentences when charged with crimes. Again, this is all research based. I'm not putting that shit in the description. Just fucking Google it. There's a history here. There's a reason why the brown paper bag test is a thing. Again, Google that. But that's a thing where black people of all genders were barred from certain cultural or social groups if they were any darker than a brown paper bag. There's a reason why so many historical black figures throughout American history are lighter skinned, possibly even biracial, and this includes black men, Du Bois, Charles Drew, Thurgood Marshall. If I bother to Google, you go down the line and look at first black person to do blank, like a disproportionate amount of those first are going to be lighter skinned black people, especially the men. By virtue of white supremacy, black people with a closer proximity to whiteness have just had more access to resources and less barriers to success. This is just historical facts. Are you with me now? All right. I understand colorism. You in the comment section, writing the dissertation, shut up and just listen to what I'm actually saying now. When we come to the media, in American media specifically, lighter skinned black men were more visible than darker skinned black men for a long time, but it wasn't always like that, nor has it stayed like that. And when we come back to desirability, specifically for black men, there is a specific fetishization for darker skin and the way that dark skin is desired in black men, not in a necessarily good way, but a flattering way per se, that is still very harmful because it's flattering. Black men tend to play into it and black women tend to participate in it. And we even see this with white men, hence the phrase tall, dark, and handsome. There's something about that element of darkness that, at least in America, translates to masculinity. When you look at white men celebrated for their looks in old Hollywood and today, you're not seeing blondes, you're not seeing pale men, you're seeing tan men with strong features, dark hair, hunter eyes, and all this other shit. That's just the way it works. And again, complexity here, because all those features for black men is also what greatly gets us discriminated against in real life. And even within Hollywood, when they want to depict black men as brutes and criminals and savages, they use dark-skinned black men. But then we get to Sidney Poitier. Foreign man, I'm sorry. I know. I know you were waiting on this. I'm sorry. Sidney Poitier is not a bad guy, but his role in this specific discourse cannot be understated, and it's not necessarily the best look for him. Sidney was a trailblazer in Hollywood. He was the first black leading man. And part of the reason was that he was, one, very dark and presented very masculine and traditional, but he also very purposefully presented that masculinity in an idealized, safe, and acceptable way. No one would ever mistake Portier for a brute because of the way he presented himself and the way he spoke. And so in that regard, he was the best of both worlds. He got to be, in many ways, that fetishized ideal of the dark-skinned black man, but also acceptable and able to integrate into, civil society. And part of that was because the types of roles that Portier played would never allow him to behave in any way that was not acceptable. Portier's characters helped create the concept of the acceptable Negro or the magical Negro. He never really was about black issues, at least on screen. He never really appeared with other black actors, especially black women, and definitely not white women, which wasn't the case for him in real life. So in that regard, he helped unearth this new image of black masculinity that became the pristine top image of what was desirable for black men. Now, this didn't immediately become the standard in Hollywood. In the 80s, we still had Mario Van Peebles and Prince and Billy D. Williams. But by the time Wesley Snipes pops up in the 90s, light-skinned leading men in Hollywood basically become extinct. Right now, think to yourself, from the 90s until now, who are the black leading men in Hollywood? Are any of them light-skinned? Pretty much none of them. All you have is Will Smith, who's, depending on how you imagine lighter skin, barely counts. The Rock, who barely counts as black. Vin Diesel, who doesn't even identify as black. If you're thinking about black leading men, you're thinking Denzel, Wesley Snipes, Don Cheadle, Samuel L. Jackson, Chadwick Boseman, and so on. That is what Hollywood has branded as the leading black men for most of the last 3 or 4 decades. And all of the iconic black male heroes from Marvel to DC and beyond are darker skinned black men. Even in anime, I don't think there's any light skinned black men. I'm not the most comic book dude ever. I know enough to be dangerous. I can't think of any top tier black heroes. I can't think of any B tier black heroes, black male heroes that are not my complexion or darker as they're depicted in the comics. Miles Morales, who's half Puerto Rican, is the same complexion as me. So whereas darker skinned black women can very legitimately and with a ton of proof show that they're being marginalized and invisibilized in American media, I don't think darker skinned black men can feel the same. They just can't. Things aren't perfect for us, right? There's still a lot to critique about the depiction of black men in our media. But if you were to say there was a huge variety for black male images for darker skinned black men right now, you'd be correct. You want a sensitive family man? Get Sterling K. Brown. You want nerds? Pick the 1 billion dark skinned black nerds from the last 20 years. You want superheroes? You got that. You want queer black men? You even have that. If you're complaining about being erased as a black man because of this one particular incident, I ain't with you on that. I'm just not. Feel free to correct me. Let me know. Drop some data in the comment section about how I'm wrong. I don't see it. Now, there are plenty of reasons as to why we see darker skinned black men in our media that are not based on that fetishized masculine image. The least of which is that most black people are darker skinned, especially worldwide. But it does call into question whether or not this particular act of erasure is truly an act of discrimination with Aaron Pierre when he is the one light-skinned drop in a very black bucket. So this brings you to the real thing to be critiquing about why this decision was made. Because understand, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be upset, specifically because Green Lantern John Stewart does have a really significant pro-black legacy in his creation because he was low-key based off of Sidney Poitier. You still get to be a little perturbed at this very specific moment of erasure. And people that are angling on that, I'm with you and I get you. To me, this casting of Aaron Pierre is more about, guess what? Capitalism than really anything else. And yes, capitalism is connected to all those other issues of race, but I haven't heard enough of a breakdown as to the specifics of why. Pierre is probably the best actor for the role that was actually going to take it in this situation. This doesn't mean discrimination and colorism are not involved, but just not in the way that people are talking about it, at least from what I've heard. First and foremost, let's think about all the other dark-skinned actors that you might want to play the role, like a Daniel Kaluuya or John Boyega or John David Washington. they're not going to do this because this is for the most part, no shade to his fans, this is a B-list superhero character. This is not an iconic black superhero to the non-comic book reading world. Green Lantern in and of himself is a B-tier superhero, even in the DC universe. So if you're talking about what is this, the third or fourth Green Lantern to ever exist, you're not going to get John Boyega, who's already been through so much drama with Disney before, to come and say, yeah, I'll take that role. You're also not going to get the OG A-listers like, Jamie Foxx or Denzel Washington or Mahershala Ali because they're old. Ali is already struggling to get Blade to come to the movies. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe you could have got Michael B. Jordan, but wouldn't that be the same problem? Low key, I think some of y'all wouldn't have complained if it was Michael B. Jordan, but I'm gonna hold that because we're getting along right now. So maybe we should get a B team figure like Marvel did low key with Chadwick Boseman. Boseman was an up and coming guy, but he wasn't quite an A-lister at the time. So maybe Trevante Rhodes could have played this role, or Kofi Siriboe. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Those are guys that probably could have done it. I really think like Jay Ellis, who played Lawrence, this could have worked for him, or better yet, Elan Noel from Insecure. Like, that man is a really good actor, and I ain't seen that brother in a minute. I'm so frustrated that he hasn't found something else to do. He's good in everything he's in. So you could argue that, but I gotta ask, have y'all seen Rebel Ridge? For the character that is Jon Stewart, from what I understand about the character, my limited knowledge only from the cartoons and a handful of comic book summaries and shit. He basically already played this character in that movie, and I don't even like that movie. So I think he's gonna be great in the role if you can get past the fact that he has hazel eyes or whatever. But what's missing from that rant right there is that this does still kind of lend itself to a capitalistic analysis. From what I understand, and there's differing arguments around this, British actors tend to be cheaper because the union rules in the UK are different, or maybe they're different here. And that is why you see Daniel Kaluuya and Idris Elba and John Boyega constantly playing black American roles. The same thing's happening with a lot of white American roles. So Pierre, being from the UK, is also part of that equation. Further, and here's where the colorism comes back, but not in the way that I've heard people argue it. The colorism in the United States for black men doesn't work the same, but it works the same pretty much anywhere outside of the United States. We all remember the story of how they covered Chadwick Boseman's face for the Black Panther posters and the international releases, because they knew that if they showed this darker skinned black men on the front of the poster, it would be less successful, especially in places like China and Asia. And anti-blackness and internalized racism is very real. As far as I can tell, colorism is not as inverted in Africa and the Caribbean as it is here in the United States when it comes to black men. Me and Foreman talked about this in his video about Vibes Cartel, an incredibly popular Jamaican musician who bleached his skin because that's how dire colorism is elsewhere. I've seen plenty of evidence that dark-skinned black men get treated similarly to dark-skinned black women outside of the United States. And so you have to wonder, as international markets get more and more important, and if we as American consumers care less about this issue, will we possibly get to a point where we see dark-skinned black men being erased from the media the same way that dark-skinned black women have? That is possible. We shouldn't take this lightly, but we should have a more nuanced understanding of how this works. There is value in having lighter skinned black men be represented in ways that they are not in our media. We should want for the image of black masculinity to not so closely be tied to a fetishized image of dark black manhood. I want a variety of black images on my screen, not just the ones that satisfy the American market or the international market. Or at a minimum, I want shit to at least be good if I'm gonna have to deal with the bullshit that is racism on a regular basis. Because let's be honest, as long as we're trusting the Hollywood apparatus to tell our stories, even when we're the ones behind the camera and behind the scenes, there's always gonna be compromises and problems when it happens. That Rebel Ridge movie is low-key trash. He fights the police in it. He don't kill not one of the motherfuckers. I could not believe I got through that whole movie, was low-key bored half of it, only for him to use non-lethal takedown methods to save his own life while, of course, getting helped by the good cop. Spoilers for that movie, by the way. Fuck that movie. Anyway, regardless of how I felt about the movie, I can't lie, he was really good. And I know he can play that same no-nonsense character in this show. And with it being a James Gunn production and James Gunn seemingly having a better idea of what to do with the DC universe, which for my money is better than the Marvel universe in terms of the totality of the stories that they can tell, I want to see what happens. And I think this could be a good thing. So I want to be clear, not telling you that you have to feel differently about it, just saying that there was nuance and complexity in the conversation that I didn't see being brought to the forefront of it. And when that's happening, especially with black men who I again say we don't have a strong analysis apparatus on YouTube and our media and academia, it is just not up to par. I felt like it needed to be engaged with. Speaking of engagement, thank you so much for watching this far into the video. You may not know this, but watching a video to the end is one of the best ways to support your favorite YouTuber. YouTube is ran on machine learning systems that judge a video's quality based on a lot of factors, but most YouTubers recognize that watch time is one of the most important ones. It theoretically means that a video was good enough to hold a viewer's attention for the duration, which means that a video will be stronger in the algorithm, which means more views and success and money for the creator. This is a game I know all too well and one that I have learned to excel at. However, it doesn't always mean the best content. It means more commercials. It means videos have to be made with all these tricks for engagement in mind. Like I should just like right now pop up, what is that thing that people do where they show the guy running rail runners, something runners, or you know, whatever the STEM trick is that you can do, that you put that on one side and I talk on this side and now you're all paying attention longer. Like, I'm not saying I'm above that. I may do that shit. Hey, I'm thinking about it. I've been leaving meat on the fucking table. Anyway, my point is, that's a part of the meta for YouTube. And that's also why my streaming service Nebula is such a big benefit to me as a creator. Because unlike YouTube, Nebula does not run on any machine learning algorithms. It's actually still ran by humans and does not measure a video's quality based on a bunch of invisible math. Instead, you, the viewer, are in complete control of what you see, not an infinite suggestion feed. And you're also going to see videos from over 200 of YouTube's best creators in their intended form without ad breaks or copyright restrictions or bad demonetization aspects and censorship and all the other bullshit we got to deal with. However, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because if you're an avid video essay watcher, you may already know what Nebula is about, but you may not know that Nebula is evolving into something new. It's evolving into a full-on independent movie studio. In the last year, Nebula has been focusing on producing its own high-production independent content. This comes in a variety of forms, some of which are still close to your typical video essay, like Real Life Lore's series on conflicts in the Middle East, or a ton of original content from Lindsay Ellis that she hasn't posted on her main channel in the last few years. But it's also in the form of travel content, like the reality elimination show, The Getaway, where several of your favorite creators go on a road trip to try to figure out which of them is a secret saboteur, except unbeknownst to them, they all are saboteurs. There's also new short films, stage plays, and a ton of other original content that you won't find on YouTube that Nebula is itself fronting the money for production on. This is giving your favorite YouTubers the chance to be more than just YouTubers. And we have a big vision for this, which is why we still need your direct support. Nebula isn't a big tech company. We're actually independently creator owned, not owned by Google or YouTube or anyone else. And thus we come directly to you as the consumer for patronage and support. So please keep that ball rolling and see what we can come up with next by using my promo code SignifiedBsides and getting 40% off a year subscription, or just click the link in the description of the video. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Thank you to Nebula for sponsoring the video. I'm FD Signifier, and this has been Lightwork.